Lost my best friends, sparked by misunderstandings. Tried to mend things, but anxiety and paranoia left me paralyzed. How do I fix this? Hello. I would like to begin by mentioning that I am new to Reddit and I am unsure about how to navigate the platform, aside from occasionally browsing content that resonates with me. However, the situation I find myself in is overwhelming and has been affecting those I care about, including my boyfriend, age 23, and my best friend and roommate, age 23. For additional context, I am assigned female at birth. If anyone I know happens to see this, I may have to delete it. Context: midway through last year, I, aged 23, experienced a fallout with my two closest friends, both aged 23. One of them, whom we will refer to as D, was my closest companion from college. I re-established our friendship after the pandemic, and most of my social circle was formed through him. The other friend, who we will call S, became incredibly close to me afterwards, as I would end up conversing with him daily. I also met my current boyfriend, referred to as C, through him. I acknowledge that I was at fault in this situation. After being labeled a doormat by several individuals previously, I perceived D as being overly hostile over what was actually a minor misunderstanding. I reacted defensively, and after he became directly aggressive, I, being fatigued and overwhelmed with my own challenges, responded harshly to him. This ongoing back and forth detrimentally affected our friendship, leading us to avoid addressing the issue altogether. S became involved because he wanted to mediate the conflict between his best friends. I was reluctant to bring new individuals into the mix, preferring to address matters exclusively between D and myself, yet I also sought reassurance, especially given my emotional state at the time. According to S, the situation was quite unclear. However, it was exacerbated by my refusal to reach out to D first, stemming from the belief that being a doormat should not be my reality, and that I was exhausted from always having to take the high road. It is foolish to think this way, because this would have been the first instance requiring me to make that move in our friendship, and I still had to demonstrate to D that our friendship was worth preserving. I genuinely care for D. Nonetheless, I had also been making friends at my job who were unaware of the situation and advised me to sever ties with him. Ultimately, this was poor judgment since they ended up being detrimental to my life, whereas D is truly a remarkable person. The entire ordeal involved much exhausting back and forth, and I was not particularly kind to S either. My stubbornness regarding who should apologize first stemmed from my paranoia, which led me to believe that D was spreading untruths among our friends and attempting to manipulate me. S played the role of reason, but I also felt hurt by Esteque's blunt approach. While I currently appreciate his honesty, I realize I was resistant to much of what he said since I felt he was either siding with D or suggesting I was not doing enough. Ultimately, I expressed my frustrations to him, leading to his decision to mute our conversation. I failed to understand that his guidance was his means of showing concern, as I was longing for comfort instead. The situation was unjust for both of them. Eventually, a third friend, whom we will call N, and my boyfriend provided support as I composed an apology to both D and S. I spoke with both of them, and they reassured me that they knew my character and recognized that I wouldn't intentionally act that way, but they needed time to process. D mentioned feeling that the situation had become abusive and that he did not trust me at that moment, though he was open to rebuilding that trust in the future. S indicated he almost blocked me but wanted me to work on improving myself. Present day, since that time, I have managed to interact with them on friendly terms during group activities, but rarely communicate through text. I have engaged in significant self-reflection and therapy, which has allowed me to recognize the triggers for my unflattering reactions. However, I suffer from significant paranoia, depression, and potential borderline personality disorder according to my initial assessment. Due to financial constraints, I cannot seek additional mental health support, and I am already in debt to my roommate for a substantial sum I lost when I was scammed out of my unemployment benefits 2 years ago. They aided me with rent during that time. Since all of this transpired, I have experienced severe panic attacks, episodes of depression and paranoia, and intermittent suicidal thoughts, although without a concrete plan. Much of my anxiety and paranoia stem from childhood trauma that I prefer not to discuss. I wish to reach out to them, Yet just as I begin to feel more stable, something inevitably triggers these distressing episodes. I have already put them through enough, and I hope to re-enter their lives only when I am more secure. They are once-in-a-lifetime friends whom I could always rely on and be completely honest with. I desire to cherish them fully, and I am fearful of subjecting them to another emotional crisis, making the thought of letting go particularly challenging for me. I do not feel comfortable discussing this with my roommate, as I sense I have already burdened them with my financial troubles, and they become uneasy when I become emotional, which occurs frequently. The only individual I can openly converse with is my boyfriend. Yet he is also facing various challenges, and it pains him to see me in distress. He has expressed his desire to assist me further, but he often appears devastated whenever I share my struggles with him. Though he is incredibly supportive and dependable, I understand that being my sole confidant may be overwhelming for him, particularly given my tendency toward hopelessness and paranoia. I often feel as if I am talking to a wall, and I only tend to react because I feel guilty for adding to his burdens. I contemplated ending our relationship since I believed I was not worth the emotional turmoil he experiences because of me, but thankfully, he did not agree with that notion. We plan to move in together later this year, and I have expressed my concerns about whether he will be able to manage my intense emotional state, especially since he has not yet witnessed the full extent of it. We are currently in a long-distance relationship, so he only receives texts without seeing my physical reactions. I feel that expanding my social circle and finding additional support would be beneficial, but I currently work 2 jobs from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and attend 3 classes, leaving me drained by the time I can finally relax. On weekends, I typically spend time with my boyfriend, although there are rare occasions when I skip a week. I love my boyfriend deeply. He is the anchor keeping me grounded during this tumultuous period. I suppose my questions are how can I demonstrate to my friends that I care and want to mend our relationship when my life feels overwhelmingly busy and I have limited time? How can I help my boyfriend support me during these severe mental health episodes? I apologize for the lengthy message and if I come off as weak or indecisive. In truth, I have struggled greatly since the last time I tried to be strong, which resulted in the loss of 2 of my closest friends. I also apologize if my thoughts are disjointed. I recently suffered a concussion at work and am still feeling somewhat disoriented. I appreciate anyone who took the time to read this. I feel quite desperate and pathetic, and I do not want to continue pushing away the people I love, but I also do not wish to hurt anyone else I care about. Story 2. I discovered Jack stole from our grandpa before he passed, resulting in Jack's cut vanishing altogether. OMG, truth from the grave. My grandmother recounted a story to me recently about how her brother faced consequences from beyond the grave. I apologize for my English, as I am not very proficient in writing and I have dyslexia. I regret any errors in the text. Now, here is the context. My grandmother hails from a family of 5, consisting of 4 daughters and 1 son. My great-grandfather, Henk, was thrilled to have a son, whom we shall refer to as Jack. Another significant point is that my great-grandfather operated a very successful business that produced high-quality clothing and bathroom textiles, such as towels and bathrobes. He amassed considerable wealth from his enterprise and ensured that everyone working for him received a fair salary. He also cared for his family. All of his children received an education and had the opportunity to obtain their driver's licenses. This was during the 1960s, a notable achievement at the time as they were the first in their small town to own a car, a radio, and a television. My great-grandfather treated everyone equally, but this changed when his first and only son arrived, following the birth of 4 daughters. Now he finally had a son, and a clear path was set for Jack to inherit the family business. Thus began Jack's upbringing, who was, to put it mildly, a rather outspoken child. This wasn't inherently bad, the issue was that his father permitted this behavior. Jack was expelled from his first school, caught shoplifting, expelled from his second school, and caught joyriding, and this continued endlessly. Henk did not take the time to admonish Jack about the seriousness of his actions. Instead, he would dismiss it and tell his wife, my great-grandmother, Anna, that it was merely youthful mischief. Anna attempted to guide Jack but ultimately found it hopeless. When Jack turned 18, Hank believed it was time to introduce him to the family business, which was thriving, with the entire family involved. Jack started at the lowest position and had to earn his way up. This is when he began to shine. By shine, my grandmother meant that, while Jack was not academically inclined, he demonstrated a strong work ethic and had a talent for business, though he was not particularly adept at handling interpersonal relationships. Jack continued to act irresponsibly and married a woman named Karen, who was eager to establish her own business while Hank was ready to retire. She pressured Jack to take over the company swiftly, pushing the rest of the family aside. Jack listened to her and informed his father that he was prepared to lead the business and that his sisters and their spouses were creating turmoil within the company's leadership. However, by that time, 1980, only one daughter and her husband were involved in the business. My grandmother managed the seamstresses and the quality control department, while my grandfather handled finances and supplier relations. Karen sought absolute control and sparked conflict within the family by spreading a rumor that my grandfather was embezzling from the company. I am unsure of the specifics, but ultimately, my great-grandfather bought out all family members, and Jack acquired his father's share. The company now belonged to Jack and Karen, but things quickly deteriorated. Seamstresses resigned, invoices went unpaid, and Jack needed to take out a loan from his great-grandfather. The family business struggled to survive, and Karen left Jack because he could not support her. It became evident that Jack was incapable of managing the business effectively and sought an escape. Eventually, my great-grandfather had witnessed enough and purchased back what remained of his company, selling it to a larger business eager to expand. This decision further increased his amassed wealth, and he established separate bank accounts for his children, indicating that if anyone was in need, they could withdraw funds from those accounts. He informed Jack that his share was reduced because he was responsible for the company's sale and had disappointed his father with his reckless management. Jack was furious, claiming that he could have succeeded if he had been given more time. This disagreement remained a bitter point between them. Things were stable for a while, but Jack went on to marry a second time to a woman named Helen, who, like Karen, desired her own entrepreneurial venture. Jack complied and withdrew money from the account to help launch Helen's business, a small barber shop that initially thrived. However, they spent lavishly without saving. After some time, my grandmother received a call from her younger brother Jack asking if she could store some items in her garage. My grandfather was skeptical of Jack and declined the request, while my grandmother initially disagreed but ultimately consented. A few weeks later, Jack was apprehended for possession of stolen goods and drug trafficking. This came as no surprise, but nonetheless it disappointed my great-grandfather Hank, who refused to assist Jack this time and proclaimed he would no longer provide his support. After a few years, Jack was released and found himself divorced once more. He remarried and went through 3 additional divorces, providing each of these women with a business as well as leading a lavish lifestyle with new vehicles, large homes, and expensive vacations. He depleted his funds and exhausted his emergency bank account, borrowing heavily from his great-grandfather and so on. In 2013, my great-grandfather fell ill. It was evident he would not recover, and he approached his final days with dignity. During this period, Jack became excessively friendly and started helping my great-grandfather sell some possessions. At one point, my grandmother sat with her father and asked about the proceeds from the sales. My great-grandfather assured her not to worry, as he had handled it in his will. After celebrating his 95th birthday, he passed away quietly and peacefully. Following the funeral, the family gathered to hear their father's will, except for Jack, who authorized my grandmother to sign on his behalf. All the children received their rightful shares, and when the notary public instructed them to sign the documents, the inheritance entirely belonged to them. At one point, my grandmother contacted my father, having come into possession of some promissory notes indicating that someone owed money to my great-grandfather. My father advised her to consult a lawyer to retrieve the funds associated with those documents. A few days after this conversation with the attorney's office, my grandmother received a call from Jack, questioning why she was claiming his money from the inheritance. She explained that she had inherited some promissory notes and intended to recover the funds owed. Jack was infuriated, asserting that this was illegal. Jack was mistaken. My great-grandfather had meticulously documented every penny he had lent Jack and structured his will so that his other children could reclaim that portion of their inheritance from their financially irresponsible brother. Furthermore, my great-grandfather discovered that Jack had embezzled from him. Jack had deposited the money earned from the sales into his personal bank account rather than giving it to his father. Following this incident, Jack ceased all communication with my grandmother and his sisters. He subsequently repaid all the money he owed and has since remained estranged from any share of the inheritance. My great-grandfather expressed in a letter his reasons for this decision. He had reached the end of his patience with Jack after all the deceit and negligence he had shown toward the family business, the money he squandered, and his refusal to take any responsibility. He delivered his final lesson to his son from beyond the grave. Story 3. I nervously raised serious future talks with my boyfriend after drinks. He stays non-committal, while I take him seeking clarity on marriage. A 25-year-old female in a relationship with a 25-year-old male. We have been dating for over 4 years. As time has passed, especially over the last year, I have begun to contemplate our long-term future. I am thinking about marriage, children, purchasing a home together, those kinds of things. We will both turn 26 in a few months, and it struck me that we are approaching our late 20s. It seems that he does not think about these topics. He has never seriously discussed proposing to me or inquired about the type of proposal I would prefer. Serious matters such as living together officially or where we might want to reside in the future are not brought up either. He claims he does not consider the future and prefers to live in the moment. Although we cohabit, my name is not on the lease, which he attributes to his plans to move and change jobs this summer as part of his career progression, which is indeed true. Consequently, I have an apartment that I do not utilize, essentially functioning as an overpriced storage unit. I feel anxious about raising these types of discussions due to my own anxiety and fear of being abandoned, compounded by his apparent indifference regarding the subject. Occasionally, I muster up the courage to speak about it after consuming a drink or two. I was unaware that this issue bothered him. Recently, though, we have had a few conversations about these matters after drinking, but had I not initiated them, we likely would not have discussed them at all. It often requires a few drinks for me to feel brave enough to speak up. I acknowledge that this is my own struggle, and I am currently seeking therapy to address my difficulty in asserting my needs and my tendency to avoid conflict, which connects to my childhood experiences. Following our Valentine's dinner, where I enjoyed 2 glasses of champagne and was not intoxicated, just feeling a bit tipsy, he mentioned that a close relative had officially moved in with her partner. This made me feel somewhat envious. During the car ride home, I suggested attending a concert in June around his birthday for a band we both adore, asking if he wanted to join me, so I could buy the tickets, and he responded non-committally, saying he hadn't even contemplated his own birthday yet and prefers to live in the moment. Regardless, I expressed my desire for us to officially live together. He questioned my meaning, stating that we already lived together. I clarified that I wanted to eliminate my apartment and officially be on the lease for our next home. I indicated my willingness to relocate for whichever job he accepts next, but needed assurance that he envisions a long-term future for us and would marry me eventually. I made it clear that I did not want to be someone's girlfriend for 20 years. Throughout our conversation, he was preoccupied with the cat and occasionally glancing at his phone while I was attempting to be vulnerable. I asked if he ever considered our future together. He replied affirmatively, but only in the context of whether I would be comfortable moving again for his career, or if I would accept if he decided not to have children. I inquired if that was all, and he reiterated that he does not think about the long term. This led to a discussion about marriage, as I expressed flexibility regarding having children, admitting I am uncertain about wanting them myself, but I am certain about wanting to get married. I emphasized that marriage holds significance for me and that I would like to be married by the age of 30 or earlier. Given that we have been together since we were 21, I asked if he didn't think that by ages 28 or 29, he would have a firm understanding of whether he wishes to marry me. He replied that he does not view marriage in that light and believes that we are too young to get engaged. I clarified that I am not asking for engagement at this moment, but age 28 seems like an appropriate timeline. I argued that if the roles were reversed, if I did not deem marriage important yet new, he did, I would also start to consider it significant because I love him and care about his priorities. At this stage, he appeared frustrated, and his tone shifted. Despite the serious nature of our discussion, I didn't intend to come off as confrontational. I asked him what he was feeling, and he expressed frustration because I tend to raise these topics after we have both consumed alcohol. I had 2 glasses of champagne, and he had 2 beers. It wasn't as though we were intoxicated, though I do acknowledge that I have sometimes brought it up while under the influence. Instantly, I felt guilty. I apologized, explaining that I had no idea this bothered him, explaining that I find it daunting to discuss these issues in a casual setting and often struggle to find an appropriate moment. We are usually busy with work, and he is generally on his phone, making it challenging to engage in deep conversations. I asked if he could empathize with my nerves in bringing such topics up, but he said he could not. I admitted that I often worry about how he will react or respond. He still did not grasp my perspective, which I understand since it is a personal matter, and he has never fully comprehended my anxiety and self-confidence challenges. I stated that he never brings up these subjects, indicating that I often feel responsible for initiating, to which he replied that his thoughts differ from mine. I attempted to validate his emotions, acknowledging his frustration, but he brushed me aside, implying that I did not need to understand. At this point, I was tearing up and beginning to cry, something that rarely happens for me. I felt disheartened, thinking I had ruined our evening and that he was in a negative mood now. He casually mentioned that there are other things I do while drinking that I do not do when sober, prompting me to ask for clarification, as I was unsure what he meant. He stated that he preferred not to discuss it further, fearing he would hurt my feelings. I assured him that if he communicated it kindly, it likely would not hurt me, but he became annoyed and instructed me to stop questioning him about it, which I suspect referred to intimate situations. He said we could have these discussions completely sober if I desired. If he was alluding to something sexual, it was ironic, considering I had gone out earlier that day, totally sober, and purchased lingerie to surprise him that evening. I informed him during the drive home, and while he responded positively, he did not seem particularly excited. I was trying to add some excitement to our intimate life, and anticipated he would suggest that I change into it immediately upon returning home, which did not occur. Now, I feel as though I am at fault for initiating this discussion after having a few drinks. These issues have been bubbling beneath the surface frequently, so whenever I have a drink and my inhibitions are lowered, they tend to emerge, especially if he mentions something that triggers those thoughts. I apologized multiple times, and he reassured me that I did not need to apologize, yet I still felt as though I had wronged him. I imagined that conversations about our future would be thrilling and joyful, even with a few drinks involved. I retreated to the bedroom to collect myself and ended up crying while he remained in the living room for a while before joining me. We cuddled before going to bed, and although he offered to bring me water and tissues, he did not provide much comfort. Today, I intend to start a sober conversation with him about this situation and see how it unfolds. Summary: I initiated a conversation while slightly tipsy with my long-term boyfriend about our future together. He feels frustrated that I raise such topics after drinking, yet he never brings them up himself. Am I in the wrong or overreacting? How should I proceed? Story 4. Am I overreacting? I'm 16, female, and planning on moving out. I am unsure how to even begin this, but here I go. I am 16 years old and female, planning to move out of my parents' house when I turn 18. I feel stressed and exhausted from dealing with my family every day. I cannot simply run away without any money. That is the reason I have decided to wait until I am 18 instead of moving out at 16. However, I would like to know if I am overreacting or if my feelings are justified. My family consists of both parents who are alive and actively involved in my life. I have 3 brothers, and I am the only girl. 2 of my brothers are adults, so I do not need to worry about them, but I have a younger brother who is 13, and I love him dearly. I am homeschooled and do not have any friends, nor am I currently seeking friendships. A day ago, I had my phone taken away because I accidentally burned dinner. I did not do it on purpose, but I was yelled at and had my belongings taken away along with enduring a lengthy rant from my mother about how much she cannot tolerate me anymore. I am unsure if it is normal for a mother to repeatedly threaten to punch her child for minor issues, but this has become a near daily occurrence for me. I have been labeled as spoiled, selfish, lazy, evil, weird, and sometimes even called stupid or a derogatory term. Countless times, I have been told that I am useless and irresponsible, that I ruin everything, and that my mother wouldn't care if I ran away and ended up as a prostitute on the streets. I have started to deeply dislike living here, and I hold resentment towards my own mother. I do not voice my feelings because it is seen as backtalk, so I have reached a point where I no longer care. For as long as I can remember, I have done most of the cleaning and occasionally the cooking around the house. If I do not cook for anyone but myself, I am considered selfish and mistreating my little brother. They do not make him do any chores, but I am not mad at him because he is like my best friend. I am upset about the unfair treatment. My mother constantly refers to him as her favorite son and blames me for everything that goes wrong in the house. She also insinuates that I will put her in a nursing home when she gets older and that I won't take care of her. I do not plan to care for anyone when I move out because at this point, I do not wish to maintain any contact with her. Fast forward to December of last year when I visited my cousin's place for 2 weeks. Suddenly, everyone in my family claimed to miss me, which is unsurprising. They are dismissive towards me until they need something. They do not even check on how I am doing. Upon returning home from my vacation, it was back to business as usual. On my first day back, I cleaned the kitchen as usual. Every dish was washed except for the pan that was soaking due to hard cheese. My mother made cheese rolls that day, so soaking the pan was necessary. The next morning, she attempted to reprimand me for the cheese being stuck in the pan, despite the fact I was soaking it for that very reason. I stood my ground and explained the situation to her. She is also not someone who prepares anything. She goes with the flow and blames me when things do not go as planned. We were getting ready for a family gathering, and she wanted to make empanadas. She knew she wanted to do this and had 2 weeks to prepare, yet we did not start until the day of the event. She then tried to get angry with me for not making pie crust, even though I told her that making pie crust is easy and that I had prepared 4 entire batches the day before. She had done nothing at all. Moving on to our family day, where she forces everyone to spend time together for 6 hours, which I despise, and I eventually managed to put an end to it. I sat down in the kitchen and spoke to my dad about my plans to move out and how he feels about it. Of course, she came over to interrupt our conversation, chiming in with "I can't wait," after I expressed my excitement about moving out soon, then proceeded to lecture me about why I should stay home with them longer. She tells me all the time that I cannot stay with my dad forever. Now let's discuss the reasons I want to move out. As far back as I can remember, I have always been viewed as the bad kid in my family. As I grew older, my personality changed, and my mother grew to dislike it. She frequently talks about how much she misses the younger version of me who was sweet and happy. Am I happy? No. Am I sweet? Quite the opposite. However, I am not heartless. Fast forward to when I was 13 years old, feeling sad and depressed. I thought I was in a safe space, that is what they told me, so I confided in them about my feelings. The next day, I overheard her on the phone calling me melodramatic. I mostly ignored her for the remainder of that day. She called me to prepare a butter mixture for dinner, and after I had done so, I went to my room. She then came out, upset that I hadn't informed her it was ready, which is understandable. She approached me and yelled, insisting that I was not to ignore her and that she didn't care if I was upset with her for calling me dramatic, pushing me multiple times against the wall. Another incident occurred when she ordered water from Walmart. My dad and brother brought the water downstairs, and a few days later, we discovered a bottle had burst and was leaking. She became upset and yelled at both me and my brother, expressing her hatred for us. Then there was the time she asked me to help with the laundry. Later, she came downstairs to check if I had done it properly, which according to her, I had not. She subsequently hit me repeatedly on the head and back. We have metal pillars in our basement, and I was standing directly behind one, causing the side of my head to make contact with the pole. This does not even include the times I have been slapped in the face multiple times, causing my ears to ring between the ages of 7 and 9. I vividly remember this because I was only 10 when I began 5th grade. While in the 5th grade, I had a small graduation party with my class. My parents provided food for everyone, and I passed out the food, even bringing some for my favorite teachers and faculty members, whom I disliked. We ended up with leftover food, and when my teacher claimed he did not receive any, I offered him some, which he declined. Later, he told my mother that I did not give him any food and tried to get me in trouble for giving a few girls from another class some food. I had classmates help pass out food, so he could have asked them for some, or being a teacher, could have helped himself. As I was walking back to the car with my mother, she said I ruin everything. That comment crushed my soul, and I internalized it for years. Continuing on, at 15 years old, I was sitting in the kitchen with my mother, trying to assist her in cooking. When I did something that did not meet her approval, she proclaimed that no man would want to deal with me and that I should get a dog and die alone. This escalated into a physical confrontation. I got up to leave because I did not want to hear her insults any longer, but she dragged me back to my seat. I stood up and pushed her back. She initiated the physical contact for no reason and screamed in her face. She smiled and laughed at me. I was incredibly upset, and even though I did not push her harder because she suffers from arthritis and I did not want to harm her, she pushed me back down into my seat. My hands were on her arms, and her hands were around my neck while my foot was on her knee, which causes her the most pain. Sometimes I should have just kicked her, but I refrained. After she released me, she warned me that if I escalated the situation any further, I would be kicked out. I was 15. I was also informed that she wishes she had all sons. She also mentioned that she wished she had my cousin instead of me because I am so boring. I know this is all jumbled, but am I overreacting? I simply had to get this off my chest as it feels like this is my breaking point. Story 5. Ex's unexpected inquiry about our relationship, 4 years later, leads my partner to emotionally console them instead of shutting it down. My partner received a text message from an unknown number the day before Valentine's Day that said, "Asking for a friend, how is your relationship going?" My partner shared this with me, and I suggested, let's determine who this is. After some investigation, we discovered that the message was sent by my partner's ex just before I came into the picture, who is now expressing curiosity. They had a tumultuous breakup and had blocked each other since then, which occurred in the spring of 2021. I entered the scene in the fall of 2021. To summarize, the ex is currently making efforts to gather information and convinced a mutual friend to reach out to my partner for updates on our relationship nearly 4 years after their chapter ended. Somehow, the ex is aware that our relationship is still going, which I find completely disrespectful. From my perspective, it is evident that the ex is seeking affirmation because knowing I'm single would provide them with the opportunity to pursue things further. My partner and I discussed this situation. Mature as I may be, I recognize that this requires my partner's attention, not mine. Given that the ex is going through considerable effort to learn about our relationship, I encouraged my partner to have a discussion with them to provide the clarity they seek. If the ex could convince a friend to gather this information 4 years later, it raises the question of what would stop them from finding someone else to do the same thing. They need to acknowledge this situation to allow their chapter to truly close. I expressed to my partner that it troubled me to know someone from their past is essentially monitoring our relationship, waiting for it to falter so they could reinsert themselves. I believed that, unless the ex received unequivocal communication that my partner was committed to me, they would likely attempt this again. Consequently, I asked my partner to speak with their ex, hoping to convey a message of "leave us alone." The conversation took place, but it did not go as well as I had anticipated. I felt uneasy and embarrassed during the exchange. My partner initiated the conversation with, "Hey, what did you want to discuss? Did we not already understand the purpose of this conversation? Why act naive?" The ex replied, "Are you still in current city?" Of course, they would want to know. My partner responded with, "I'm happily with my girlfriend and planning to get married within the next year or two," to which the ex replied, "Ugh, okay, I just wanted to know." Naturally, you would think the conversation would end there. You would expect that everything that needed to be said had already been addressed. Yet, it did not conclude. My partner then began inquiring about the ex's relationship, giving the impression that they were interested and concerned. They asked, "How have you been? How is everything going? Are you still in your relationship?" This turned a conversation that should have been firm and serious about our relationship into an emotional therapy session between them. The very purpose of our prior discussions about this conversation seemed to have been forgotten, especially acknowledging how much it distressed me. Ultimately, my partner had a 5-hour conversation aimed at comforting their ex due to their current relationship troubles. The ex is going through a divorce, but remains stuck living with their partner due to a lease. It was evident that they were emotionally struggling and seeking their next target. And this happened just a day before Valentine's Day. Seriously. I feel as though my partner failed to grasp that. 1. The ex is only concerned about whether my partner and I are still together to determine their next steps. And 2. My partner inadvertently fulfilled the ex's need for emotional support that they sought in the first place. I believe the situation would have been different had the ex approached this in a straightforward and friendly manner, if they genuinely just wanted to catch up on life. However, they immediately delved into inquiries about our relationship. Picture this: I sat on the couch opposite my partner as they engaged in this text conversation, hoping that my partner would address the issue of their past trying to intrude on our relationship. Instead, it felt as if they entertained the ex and conveyed a message of, "Feel free to talk to me anytime if you need to vent. We are friends," instead of firmly establishing, "We're happy, so leave us alone." My partner ended up playing therapist to their ex while I was right there, thinking to myself, perhaps they haven't contacted them yet, and that's why my partner hasn't informed me that this was resolved. Let's just continue watching our favorite TV show. We were together the entire time from 1 p.m. to 4:30 p.m., and my partner had to leave for work at 5 p.m. They did not mention any of this to me until 10 p.m. that night, even though they returned home at 9 p.m. The conversation took place from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. Throughout that time, my partner was still giving me kisses, hugs, and saying, "I love you," even in the midst of their conversation. Do not misunderstand me. The initial 5 minutes of their chat were all that was required. It was direct, firm, and most importantly, confident and assertive. It was the remaining 4 hours and 55 minutes that linger on my mind. When I was eventually told, it was taken care of. "Do you want to read it?" I did, and immediately conveyed to my partner how odd I felt. It was not that they had done anything wrong, but I sensed that my partner was overly accommodating. Too much of a pushover. Too oblivious to the manipulation their ex was trying to employ. A day before Valentine's Day, aware that their current romantic relationship is thriving. There was no way the conversation conveyed that the ex understood the message to leave us be. If anything, it seems to have left a door ajar, and I fear this may happen again in the future. The thought of envisioning a future where I hope to marry my partner and start a family feels sickening if this pattern recurs. It makes me think, oh, so that's how you would handle such a situation. To make matters more intriguing, my partner tends to behave this way with all their exes. This occurred frequently in 2022, with various exes reaching out to ask, "Are you still in a relationship?" It felt like watching all their skeletons return. I had forgiven, forgotten, and moved on. Yet in 2023 and 2024, everything was smooth and uninterrupted. Now, in 2025, I find myself grappling with this strange urge, wondering why I didn't recognize the red flags sooner. It is perplexing. I trust my partner and am confident they would never pursue anything romantic, but being aware that the other party is still overly friendly, that does not sit well with me. I wish my partner would approach our relationship with the tenacity of a German Shepherd or a Rottweiler, as opposed to being like a Yorkie or Golden Retriever. I'm not sure if that analogy resonates with everyone, but those who understand, understand. The question I pose is this: has anyone else experienced something similar? This doesn't necessarily seem like a deal breaker, but it certainly leaves me with an unsettling feeling. My partner understands that I require time to process this, especially given how many times we have encountered similar situations. I find myself questioning when enough is enough. Is this merely a matter of incompatibility? I do not wish to be toxic either. I simply feel uneasy about how they handled an intrusion on our relationship, and it's turning me off. I would appreciate any guidance. Thank you to anyone who takes the time to read this thoroughly. Any advice would mean a lot to me. What would you do if you were in my position? Story 6. My BF cheated on me, and now I hate him. I have been in a relationship with my boyfriend for nearly 4 years now. I won't delve into the details of our history or how we first met, but he betrayed my trust by cheating on me about 2 years ago, and since that incident, I have harbored intense feelings of resentment toward him. I recall that, at the beginning of 2023, we faced several challenges. We were repeatedly arguing and intermittently cutting off communication. At some point in February, I began to distance myself from him. I didn't completely ignore him, but when he would reach out, I would provide minimal responses. It wasn't until late February or early March that he began to reciprocate my neglect. I'm not sure if it was due to his lack of attention or if I had begun to process my emotions, but I eventually started reaching out again, apologizing and attempting to restore normalcy. However, he would take hours to reply, and occasionally, when he did respond, he would show affection. I thought everything was fine until he sent me a random video featuring another girl's image. Initially, I assumed he was joking and trying to provoke jealousy or anger in me, so I didn't give it much thought. I figured he had simply found it online and therefore wasn't very upset. Even though we had previously accused one another of infidelity, I never genuinely believed he would act on it. My frustration grew as he would take up to half a day to respond to my messages, despite being active on various social media and applications. On my birthday, he sent me a photograph of a girl, and I was taken aback. I couldn't believe that he could behave this way. He quickly deleted the image, but fortunately, I had saved it. In denial, I conducted reverse image searches on various platforms, but none returned matching results. It was then that I realized he was indeed cheating on me, all while professing affection with declarations like, "I love you." Although we fought frequently during this period, we had never explicitly stated that our relationship was over, so it was reasonable to assume that we were still a couple. The timeline of events and my recollections after this revelation grew increasingly unclear. I cried incessantly and questioned him about his actions. He claimed he would end things with her, which he did, but my heart was already shattered. I made the grave mistake of staying with him. Part of me believed everything would be all right because he had chosen me over her after all. Yet, days and weeks passed, and all that occupied my mind was her image, leading to nightly tears. My mental well-being was suffering. There were instances when I would gaze at her picture, comparing myself to her. Concurrently, my eczema flared up and my entire life felt chaotic. My academic performance also declined, and I would find myself crying spontaneously at school, at work, and everywhere else. Every day seemed like a cycle of despair. In early April, there were instances where we would still express affection and say, "I love you," but we also had numerous arguments. When I was upset about his actions, I would send him the photograph of her. At some point in April, I found myself sympathizing with the girl because I realized that he was not only betraying me but also her. Therefore, I insisted that he apologize to her. He sent her a casual message saying, "Hey," but she never responded. By May, my process of grief had taken a turn, as I recall being angry with him consistently. I had never known her name, so I pressed him for her name and Instagram account. He consistently refused, claiming he didn't want to hurt my feelings. After weeks of pleading, he finally provided me with her name and Instagram, after which I became increasingly obsessive, stalking her online for hours. I had followed her, and one day she reached out to me, asking why I kept following her. As we began to converse, I revealed the truth that my boyfriend had cheated on me with her. Fast forward to the night of June 10, she informed me that he had reached out to her in either April or May expressing a desire to rekindle their relationship. Thankfully, she had evidence to back up her claims, and upon reading the messages, I felt nauseous. I confronted him and was extremely upset. He insisted that he didn't mean what he had communicated to her, but I was skeptical. He continued to assert that she was lying and trying to sabotage our relationship, even going so far as to message her, urging her to stay away. In the days that followed, I was consumed by tears. The second worst decision I made was remaining in a relationship with him after discovering he had wanted to reconcile with his ex. I never truly healed. Days, weeks, and months passed, and I even confessed my love for him. I continued communicating with his ex. However, on a seemingly ordinary day, I abruptly stopped expressing my love for him. It became increasingly difficult to say those words because I realized I didn't genuinely feel that way. I believe this is when it hit me that I had ceased to love him and, in fact, harbored hatred toward him. I loathed every aspect of him. Even his mere presence would infuriate me. There were times when I would block or ignore him for days or even weeks. I could no longer tolerate him. When I thought of him, feelings of rage and anger would wash over me. This conflict persisted into 2024 and 2025, and here we are, still in a relationship. I think my only reason for staying with him is the belief that I won't find love again. I despise him immensely, yet for some inexplicable reason, leaving him feels overwhelmingly difficult. While there are fleeting moments when I feel affection for him, they vanish quickly, replaced by my intense anger. I frequently instigate arguments regarding his love for me and whether he is likely cheating at this moment. I have expressed to him that I wish he were dead, that I see no future or family with him, and I would rather perish than engage in a life with him. To be honest, the idea of having children with him disgusts me. I cannot fathom creating anything that is half of him. The prospect of loving something that embodies a piece of him enrages me. I desperately want to escape this relationship, yet whenever I attempt to do so, I find myself drawn back to him, despite my hatred. I wish nothing but hardship for him. I feel torn and uncertain about my future. I have lost faith in him. Each time I inquire why he cheated, he nearly always denies it. He frequently accuses me of infidelity, which I believe is a projection of his own actions. I regret ever meeting him. I don't cry much about what happened anymore, yet there are still nights when I find myself sobbing uncontrollably. He is quite affectionate towards me at the moment, but it all feels insincere. I despise him profoundly, yet I cannot seem to leave him. I think I mention my hatred for him more often than my love.